The humiliation. The airport was busy that morning. People hurried through the gates, dragging suitcases and checking their phones. Among them walked Marcus Bryant, a tall black man in his mid-40s, wearing a clean gray suit and polished shoes. His ticket read first class, and he carried himself with quiet confidence. When Marcus reached the counter, the gate attendant glanced at him, then at the ticket, and frowned. "Sir, economy is boarding at the other gate," she said, her tone sharp and dismissive. Marcus gave a polite smile and replied, "I'm in first class." "Here's my ticket." The attendant barely looked at it. She rolled her eyes and waved her hand. "Sir, you must be mistaken. Please don't hold up the line." People behind him shifted impatiently. A couple whispered, and someone chuckled under their breath. Marcus felt the sting of their judgment, but he stayed calm. He placed the ticket back on the counter, steady and firm. "This is a first-class ticket. Please check again." The attendant sighed loudly, as if he were wasting her time. Finally, she scanned it, and her face tightened. She didn't apologize. Instead, she said, "Fine, go ahead." Her voice carried annoyance, as though allowing him to board was a favor. Inside the plane, the humiliation continued. As Marcus placed his bag in the overhead bin, one of the flight attendants stepped forward. "Sir, this section is reserved for first class. Economy is in the back." Marcus looked at her directly and spoke in the same calm voice. "This is my seat. 2A. The attendant checked, realized he was correct, and muttered something under her breath. She didn't offer to help with his bag or even smile. Instead, she turned quickly to greet the next passenger, a well-dressed white man, with a wide smile and cheerful tone. Marcus sat down quietly, his face unreadable. Around him, other passengers settled in, receiving warm welcomes and offers of champagne. No one offered him anything. It was as if he didn't belong, even though he had paid the same price as everyone else in that cabin. The whispers from earlier still echoed in his mind. It wasn't just about the seat. It was about being seen as less than because of who he was. Marcus folded his hands, staring out the window, his jaw tight but his composure unbroken. What the crew didn't know was that Marcus Bryant was no ordinary passenger. His silence hid a power that, in just a few minutes, would change their lives forever. The power behind the silence. Marcus Bryant leaned back in his seat, keeping his expression calm. To anyone watching, he looked like a man ignoring a minor inconvenience. But inside a storm brewed. Years of experience had taught him one valuable lesson. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits. Marcus wasn't just any traveler. He was the vice president of global operations for a massive corporation that owned several companies, including this very airline. The crew had no idea. To them, he was just another black man they thought didn't belong in first class. But to Marcus, their arrogance was more than personal. It was professional failure. He remembered the long road that had brought him here. As a young man, he had been underestimated countless times. Professors doubted his abilities. Colleagues dismissed his ideas. Investors ignored him until his results spoke louder than any prejudice. He had risen higher each time, not through anger but through focus and excellence. That same focus kept him steady now, even as humiliation burned inside him. Without drawing attention, Marcus reached into his suit pocket and pulled out his phone. He typed a short message to his assistant. Flight 227, document everything. Alert legal and HR, video call ready in 30. The reply came instantly. Understood. Closing the phone, Marcus glanced around. A flight attendant passed by offering champagne to others but skipped his row completely. The man in 2B received a warm smile and 2 napkins. Marcus received nothing, not even acknowledgement. He noted every detail silently. Each gesture was evidence. Each cold stare was another nail in their own coffin. Minutes later, the captain's voice came over the intercom, greeting passengers and praising the crew for their hospitality. Marcus almost smiled. Hospitality was the last word he would use for what he had just experienced. When a flight attendant finally stopped by, she asked with irritation, "Do you need something?" Marcus looked up and replied evenly, "No, thank you." His voice carried no anger, only calm weight. The kind of calm that makes people uneasy without knowing why. The flight continued as usual, with laughter, clinking glasses, and polite chatter in first class. Marcus sat quietly, watching, recording, remembering. Every second mattered. What the crew didn't see was the chessboard moving beyond the cabin. In less than an hour, the airline's leadership would know what had happened. And in less than a day, lives would change. For Marcus, silence was not weakness. It was strategy, and his silence had just become the crew's greatest mistake. The breaking point. The plane cruised smoothly above the clouds, but inside Marcus Bryant's mind, every slight detail was being filed away like evidence in a courtroom. He noticed how quickly the attendants rushed to refill drinks for others. He noticed how their smiles widened for passengers who looked important in their eyes. Yet for him, they passed by as though his seat were empty. One attendant even leaned across him without a word, serving the man in 2B. Marcus wasn't invisible. He was being deliberately ignored. Each action screamed a message. You don't belong here. Marcus remained composed, his face calm, but his silence was louder than any outburst. Across the aisle, a middle-aged woman in business attire watched the treatment with discomfort. She finally leaned closer and whispered, I saw how they spoke to you at the gate. It isn't right. Marcus gave a polite nod, his deep voice quiet. Thank you for noticing. That was all he said, but the woman could sense the weight behind it. As the flight went on, Marcus opened the Airline magazine tucked into the seat pocket. Ironically, it featured a smiling advertisement about equal treatment for all passengers. The words made him almost laugh. Hypocrisy had never been printed so clearly. When a flight attendant finally addressed him again, it was with the same dismissive tone. Sir, your tray table needs to be up. Regulations. She didn't wait for his response before turning away. Marcus lifted the tray slowly, his eyes steady, but inside the line had been crossed. This was no longer just about rudeness. This was about systemic disrespect. He pulled out his phone once more, this time not to type, but to record. He filmed the cheerful greetings given to others, the ignored requests, the sharp tone directed only at him. He captured moments that would leave no room for excuses later. By the time the captain announced their descent, Marcus had gathered more than enough. Around him, passengers stretched and prepared to land. The crew moved with casual ease, still unaware that their every move had been documented. As the wheels touched the runway, Marcus closed his phone and slipped it into his pocket. His expression remained calm, but his eyes were unshakable, the look of a man who had already decided what came next. When the seatbelt light went off, Marcus rose slowly. Just then, the airport manager appeared at the jet bridge, breathless, his face pale. He rushed straight toward Marcus. Mr. Bryant, the manager stammered, headquarters is waiting for you on the line. Immediately, the crew froze, confusion flashing across their faces. They still didn't realize that their breaking point had already arrived. The consequences. The jet bridge was tense as passengers filed out, some stretching, some eager to make connecting flights. But for Marcus Bryant, time seemed to slow. The airport manager stood waiting with a phone in hand, his posture stiff and his expression nervous. Mr. Bryant, he said again, his voice hushed but urgent. The board is on video call. They need to speak with you now. Marcus gave a small nod, collected his carry-on and walked with calm authority. The crew glanced at one another confused. A few even smirked, assuming this was some kind of mistake. They still didn't know who they had just offended. Inside the executive lounge, a private room had been prepared. A large screen flickered to life, revealing several familiar faces, directors of the airline's parent company. Their expressions were serious, almost grim. Marcus placed his phone on the table and pressed play. The video clips rolled. The dismissive gate attendant, the condescending tone of the crew, the selective service, the cold stares. Each detail spoke louder than any accusation. The room was silent, except for the voices captured on the recordings. When the clips ended, Marcus folded his hands and leaned back in his chair. His calmness was sharper than anger. This is not only an insult to me, he said evenly. It is a stain on this company's name. This is the service your first-class passengers receive? The directors exchanged glances. One of them cleared his throat. This is unacceptable, Marcus. Immediate action must be taken. Marcus didn't have to demand anything. His silence, his composure, and the evidence were enough. Within minutes, calls were made. The captain and the crew members involved were terminated on the spot. The gate attendant was suspended pending investigation. Meanwhile, word began spreading through the airport staff. Whispers turned into wide eyes as they realized the truth. The man they had dismissed was not just a passenger. He was their boss's boss. The manager looked at Marcus cautiously, as though standing near a storm. But Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't smile. Instead, he gave a single instruction. Make sure this never happens again. The directors agreed to launch a new diversity and respect training program, overseen directly by Marcus himself. He wasn't interested in revenge. He was interested in change. As Marcus stood to leave, the weight of his quiet authority filled the room. The crew's arrogance had cost them everything, and his silence had spoken louder than their scorn. Justice and change news of the incident spread faster than the flight itself. By the time Marcus Bryant stepped out of the lounge, his phone buzzed with alerts. Headlines appeared across social media. Black executive humiliated on first-class flight, responds with power. Photos of him walking through the airport began circulating online, his calm expression sparking curiosity and respect. For many, Marcus became a symbol, not just of wealth or power, but of dignity in the face of prejudice. Some praised his composure, admiring how he turned humiliation into change. Others criticized, claiming he had been too harsh on the crew. Marcus, however, didn't waste time on opinions. He focused on results. Within days, the airline announced sweeping reforms. Mandatory training on diversity, respect, and customer treatment would begin immediately. A new hotline for passengers to report misconduct was launched. The company released a public apology, acknowledging the injustice and promising accountability. In interviews, Marcus was direct but measured. A reporter asked, "Did you feel satisfaction in firing the crew?" Marcus looked into the camera, his voice steady. It was never about firing anyone. It was about respect. No passenger should ever feel lesser because of who they are. Not on my watch. That statement echoed worldwide. It wasn't revenge that made headlines. It was the clarity of his message. Respect was not a privilege for a few. It was a right for all. Back at his office, Marcus reflected on what had happened. He thought about the whispers at the gate, the smirks, the cold service. He remembered the woman across the aisle who spoke up quietly, proving that not everyone had chosen silence. For Marcus, the incident was more than a personal victory. It was a reminder of why he had fought so hard to climb the corporate ladder. Every step, every battle, every moment of being underestimated had prepared him for this. Not to humiliate others, but to ensure dignity for those who came after him. The next time Marcus boarded a flight, the greeting was warm, the service attentive. But more important than the smiles was the knowledge that policies had changed because he refused to let silence go unnoticed. He fastened his seatbelt, leaned back, and allowed himself a rare smile. Not because he had won, but because respect had finally taken its rightful place in the skies.